Hi everyone, and welcome to the Texas and Pocono edition of Before the Green Flag. GMS Racing's NASCAR Campboard Truck Series teams and ARCA Racing teams are both in action this weekend at opposite ends of the country. Brandon Jones and Spencer Gallagher will head west to Texas Motor Speedway for the 7th event of the 2015 season, while ARCA Points leader Grant Enfinger will tackle the Pocono Raceway Triangle on Saturday afternoon.
Grant will look to extend his points lead this weekend and has a best finish of 3rd in 5 career Pocono starts. In the Truck Series, Brandon is coming off his best finish of 8th this season at Dover and is shooting for his 2nd straight top 10 finish. Spencer jumped 2 positions to 7th in the standings at Dover and will continue his quest towards the top 5 in points in Texas.
With 2 races on tap, we'll keep you ready for all the action this weekend on Before the Green Flag.
Hello race fans, and welcome to another edition of Before the Green Flag on GMSRacing.net. I'm Justin Walken, joined by Joey Coulter and Josh Weinert. And this week, both GMS teams are in action, with the ARCA team heading to Pocono Raceway and the trucks going to Texas Motor Speedway. And to kind of focus on the trucks first, guys, we know that Texas is a super fast, high-banked racetrack. So for GMS, what do you see as the big challenge heading into the weekend?
Texas is tough. You know, it's high speed. It's one of those tracks that it's gotten older, but it's not really gotten any slower.
Yeah.
It's lost grip. It's a huge changes with temperature a bunch, but it's still real high speed, really good racing. It's one of my favorites on the schedule for sure, because you qualify wide open, you start your race run wide open, and there's a point where you get to a point where you're still running wide open, but your lap times just start falling because you just start sliding, and that's when it becomes a throttle game, and where you see some drivers start to fall back, other drivers start moving forward. It's really fun, and it's a challenge for sure. But I think our drivers are going to be in pretty good shape. You know, Spencer's got some laps there. Brandon's never been there, but had a really good experience at Charlotte, which is, I'll put Charlotte and Texas close to the same category. Texas is still a whole nother animal, but I'll put them pretty close together. So and Brandon's crew chief Shane Huffman, I'm sure he's raced there before. I know he's been there a bunch of times, on truck teams before. So I think everybody's going to be pretty well prepared for it. I know the guys learned a ton from the Charlotte race.
Yeah, Texas is such a fun race to watch because of the fact that you slide around the pavement's old. But one other factor that you don't really see on the Cup or Xfinity side with their race dates is the fact it's the start of June and it's going to be hot. I mean, looking at the forecast, it's going to be in the 90s there all week. I mean, we'll probably, by the time we race, it'll cool off to maybe 85. And
Cool off.
Yeah. And, the track temperature is going to stay up. And, typically when we, practice and qualify during the day and race at night, the place really, really grips up. But with Texas having one of the oldest surfaces on the circuit, it's not really going to grip up.
Yeah.
Like that place. The place loses so much grip, especially throughout the fuel run. You can really see guys sliding around throughout the run, and that's really cool to watch, and that promotes good racing. And we raced Atlanta earlier this year. That surface is really old, but the huge difference, I would imagine, is the transitions in and out of the corner, and at Texas, how quickly the banking falls away. Whereas Atlanta, it stays all the banking stays with you all the way up on the straightaway almost, and that's just one other element that you guys have to deal with at Texas.
Yeah, in Texas, it's pretty well different on both ends. Turn 1 is more similar to Charlotte, where you drive off the banking into the corner and go fall down in the hole. The tunnel, where the tunnel goes under the racetrack in 1 and 2, has become a pretty prominent bump.
Looks like you go over railroad tracks.
Yeah. So it's gotten a little bit more character to it over the past few years. And then when you get to 3. The entrance to 3 is a lot wider. It's a little bit more of a shallow, hill going down into the corner. And that corner just overall is a lot smoother, which is why you see guys spread out down on that end a lot more.
And Josh, you were able to actually catch up with Spencer this week and kind of get his thoughts of what his strategy is heading into Texas Motor Speedway.
Texas is a real unique place from all the other mile and a halves around about how you got to drive. There's not many places that are as fast and as high banked as it, and there's a lot of transitional elements that you got to deal with, both getting in and out of the corners. There's a huge bump over in 1, really flattens off at the end of both corners, 2 and 4, and you'll get real loose in the race coming up out of the hole. So having a good balance that can get you through traffic is crucial there.
So Spencer Gallagher giving his insight into this weekend's race at Texas. And guys, now for Brandon Jones, it's going to be his first start at Texas. And how, as a first-time driver, do you experience, get ready for a track with that much speed and banking?
Like I said, Texas is tough, and it's definitely tough your first time there. It's really fast. The good news is he's got a lot of laps in at Charlotte, which is a good step towards Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Texas is still its own animal, but those guys, again, they had a good run at Charlotte despite a little issue, and he had a top 10 run at Dover. So Brandon's got some pretty decent momentum right now. Spencer's run at Texas before. We ran pretty good there last year, so we got a decent notebook. And Brandon's, we talk about Spencer being good at it. Brandon's pretty good at adapting to those places the first time too. And again, he's real observant about other people, the trucks around him. He'll learn from other guys pretty quick. And again, his crew chief Shane Huffman has a ton of experience at a lot of places as a driver and a crew chief. So those guys working together at 10 or 15 laps into practice, they'll have it down pat.
Yeah, the last two races, Brandon's really come back from some adversity. Last week spent out in qualifying. He had to start all the way in the back. There's a lot of different pit strategies that those guys navigated themselves through, and came home with their best finish of the season so far in 8th. And Charlotte, same thing too. They had a little exhaust issue. Came 2 laps down, got both laps back. Got back on the lead lap, finished 13th. So for a young guy who's he's hasn't even run 15 truck races in his career. The last couple of races they've seen a lot of adversity, and they've really responded to it well. So, this weekend, I mean, if those guys can ever get a smooth weekend where they're not facing where they're not starting the race in a hole or digging themselves out of a lap down or something, I'd watch out. Because Brandon said outright speed. They just need to, get through an entire race weekend without any hiccups, and they'll be right there in top 10 again this weekend.
Definitely. And now, kind of shifting gears, we have our ARCA team with Grant Enfinger heading to Pocono, which is a unique track that we all know. I mean, it's probably one of the most unique tracks we go to, and we've seen Grant have strong speed and performance all year. How do you see him making out this week at Pocono that's completely kind of different from everything he's been to this year?
This is going to be different this weekend because it's the first intermediate track that we've gone to. We've had some plate stuff. We'd have a ton of short track stuff. And, throw a road course in there too. But Pocono, you'd know better than anyone. You won there. So, Pocono's at tons of grip. It's recently repaved about 2-3 years ago. Still tons of grip, smooth as glass, and from everyone that I've talked with, running ARCA cars there, the tunnel turns, that's a white knuckle experience going through there.
It's white knuckle walking through there. It's a really cool track. It's so technical. It's a left-handed road course almost. You really drive every corner completely different, and it's one of those tracks. I remember my first time there, I was in an ARCA car. It was so frustrating because if you put 2 of the 3 corners together, your lap was still terrible. And it's a really tough place to learn, which is why you see guys with a lot of experience like Grant run well there pretty much every time, because it's just a track that you just have to keep going back and keep learning new things to really figure it out. It's going to be interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, this will be the first time where everybody's going to have these Ilmor motors on a big racetrack. Pocono historically in an ARCA car has been pretty well horsepower dominated. If you could make a lot of horsepower down that front stretch, then you were hard to beat. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be a great race. And Grant and them have been buffing that car out for the past couple weeks, and it's looking good. I think he's going to have a really good shot.
And one other thing to watch for this weekend at Pocono is pit strategy, where Joey said it is kind of a road course because all 3 corners are different, but because you're running 56 second laps, you can make a green flag pit stop if you're close enough. If you're in close enough proximity to the race leader, you can make a green flag 4-tire pit stop and get off pit road before losing a lap. And if you can sniff out when a caution's going to come out and get to pit road before then, you can steal a ton of track position.
Oh yeah.
We've seen we've seen ARCA races there in the past, because they're short races. Guys would come into pit coming to the green flag to fill up with fuel and go, conserve fuel for an entire fuel run and wind up stealing races there. So it always seems that, at least one of the ARCA races at Pocono, seems like almost every single year somebody pulls some crazy pit strategy and winds up stealing a good finish or the win too. So that's something to keep an eye on.
And me and you, Josh, we were able to catch up with Grant this week and kind of get his take of what his strategy is heading into Pocono.
Balance at Pocono is always a trade-off. So turn one, I compare it to a lot of the intermediate tracks we go to. The dog leg, the tunnel turn back there, it's different than anywhere we go. And turn three is probably the most important turn. You got to get off of turn three really, really good because it sets up for that big, long straightaway. So there's definitely a trade-off every one of them, but just kind of got to make the most balance, get the best balance you can for all three.
So a lot of racing action on tap this weekend for both GMS racing teams. And before we go, you know that Texas always has this level of excitement around it. Like everyone looks forward to going there. And what makes Texas such a fun place to go to?
Heart 8 barbecue for one.
Plenty of good places to eat. A lot of good music.
Yeah, cowboy boots, big hats.
Yeah.
Just all kinds of good stuff. It's just a fun place to go. It's good, awesome racetrack, good racing, fun crowd. Probably one of the more fun crowds.
Really fun
we
crowd.
Race around. Yeah.
Yeah, really nice. Really nice facility. I think we always talk about how top notch Charlotte Motor Speedway is and their whole staff. Texas Motor Speedway's right there with them. Place is always in tip top shape when we show up. Racing is always really interesting. I don't think there's ever a Texas race that plays out like the previous one, so it's always interesting. Yeah, I think we're gonna get some barbecue. I may pick up a new cowboy hat or something.
Yeah.
So.
Need one too.
And so you can be sure to follow for all the action at Texas and at Pocono this weekend by following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where we'll keep you updated on all the practice times, qualifying, and race action. And also be sure to be checking out our new videos that we're posting all the time on YouTube and Facebook. Leave your comments, feedback, share with your friends, all that good stuff. And also, finally, be sure to check out gmsracing.net, where we get you all the info leading up to pre-race, post-race, and everything in between. And I'm Justin Wappen, joined by Joey Coulter and Josh Wyrick, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Before the Green Flag, and we'll see you next week.